Hey guys. Okay, so in building our nuke plant, I said there was some things I was going to talk about, and rather than kind of disturb the flow of those videos, we'll go ahead and make those as a separate video and put a couple of them in here. So this is the first one of those. We're going to talk about something called an SR latch. That's for set and R for reset latch. And latch is it's going to lock into one of those or the other one. So look at it like the light switch in your house. If you turn your light switch on, then it's on. And it stays on until you turn it off. And when you turn it off, it stays off until you turn it back on. So it needs an outside force to switch it from one state to the other. An SR latch basically does the same thing. It switches from one state to another and it stays locked until a condition changes it to the other state, and then it stays locked again. So what we've got here is just basically a miniature version of your factory. So we've got all these lights down here. That's going to be the load. That's going to be all your machines and your inserters and blah, 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 right? And then we've got a solar power plant, and we've got a steam power plant. And then we've got our accumulators. Now the poles up here are to connect the solar panels. The pole here is to connect these accumulators, but not this accumulator. This pole is keeping it separate, and there's a reason I want them on two separate systems, and we'll look at that in a minute. These are power switches. Not a lot of people use them in the game. I don't see a lot of use for them in the game, or a lot of other people use them. I like them. This allows me to turn on and off sections of my grid. So if I need to shed load in my grid for some reason, maybe I've got some stuff that's really important, like my lasers, all of a sudden I'm getting really attacked, but so I need all my power going to my lasers and not less useful parts of my power plant. I can open that switch, turn off that section of the power plant, or turn off that section of the factory, and all my power will go to my lasers. So there's really good uses for it. And the nice thing is, if we go to our map view, we can actually see these switches on our map view. And I can go in here, like, so green is closed and red is open. So I can go to this switch on map view, open it, and now if we look, it's open, right? And I can go back in and close it if I need to. This is going to be really handy when you're off on another planet and you need to, oh crap, something in your power plant. If you include some switches in different places, you can isolate parts of the plant. All right? And we're going to use that to our advantage here. What we're going to do is we've basically built a system where I can isolate out the solar panels and I can isolate out the steam plant. So right now I don't have any fuel in there, but I've got the steam plant turned off. So if I'm in a situation where normally all of my solar panels and my accumulators take care of all my load, but I have a steam plant connected, this steam plant's going to run and take part of the load just because that's the way the mechanics in Factorio work. The load is shared proportionally across everybody. This steam plant's going to run no matter whether it needs to or not. But if I put a switch in here, I can turn this off and I don't have to run it unless I absolutely need it. The problem is, then I have to monitor that and do it manually and turn it on and off. This SR latch is going to allow us to do that automatically. We won't ever have to worry about this again. It'll run when it needs to and not run when it doesn't need to. That's going to save on fuel usage. It's going to save on pollution, etc., etc. So here's what we've got. We've got that coming into this switch and runs those lights, or runs the accumulators. That's the lights. If we turn our power off, it's going to drain out of that accumulator until it's empty and the lights will go out. Now, if I had this switch closed, it would have to drain these ones as well, which I don't want to, right? So you'll see, when that hits zero, that accumulator's no more. These accumulators still have voltage, but our lights are off, all right? So we'll go ahead and close that. Open that because we don't need these bouncing back and forth right now. We'll let that charge back up. Where we're going to concentrate is down here. Now, I've got a green wire connected from this accumulator to this pole so that I can monitor this accumulator. And you can see down here, I have an accumulator and a number. That number represents a percentage of the charge of this accumulator, 1 to 100. So 100 is 100% charge, 50 is 50% charge, 0 is 0% charge, okay? We're going to have to use that number. We're going to take advantage of being able to monitor that. So I'm going to grab, now I'm going to use the green wires for our monitoring stuff. I'm going to use the red wires for our actual work. So we're going to come out of that accumulator and we're going to come into our decider combinator, into the input, okay? And these can be right next to one another. They don't have to be separate. They can be turned whatever direction. I did it this way just for convenience. So we come in here, all right, and I've already kind of got this set up. We're going to tell this accumulator, right, and we're going to tell it less than 10. So if the accumulator charge is less than 10 or less than 10%, we're going to output accumulator 1. So if the charge of this is less than 10%, it's going to output a 1. If it's 11 or better, it won't output anything, okay? And we can look at that here. If we look at this pole, there's nothing there right now. If we close this, open this, and when that discharges, right, it's 100% right now and it's sunlight, these will start using it. This number will start going down. When it hits less than 10%, it'll put a 1 out here. In the meantime, let's get set up. So we're going to take that 1 that's going to come out of here, and we're going to put it into our arithmetic combinator. All right, and in our arithmetic combinator, what we're going to do is these settings right here. We're going to tell it to take that accumulator signal. We're going to multiply it by negative 25, and it has to be negative because we're subtracting it from the other one. So multiply that 1 times negative 25 and output that number as an accumulator signal. All right, so it'll come in out of here as a 1 into here, and it'll come out of here as a negative 25, but only if this is making a 1. If it's not making a 1, this goes away. All right, now we're going to take that signal and we're going to put it back in here. All right, and what that's going to do is it's going to put that negative 25 back into the signal coming in here. So you're going to get a combination of the negative 25 and the 10, and it's going to stay there until suddenly that number overcomes this number and it flips this off, and then that number goes away, and it's going to stay there until such a time as it's changed again. In other words, this goes low. All right, I hope that makes sense. We'll see it in action in a minute here. So then that is going to allow us to hold this number at either 1 or 0 based on this charge. We can then turn around and take that signal and we can bring it over here and we can hook it up to our switch. All right, and we can tell our switch that we want to enable, disable if that number, if the accumulator equals 1, because we're either going to get a 1 or a 0. So if it equals 1, that means we're less than 10%. This has switched itself through its phases and turned on, and it's going to close this switch. And what will happen is it'll bring that generator online, but only when this hits 10%. And then when it goes above the 10%, it's going to turn this generator back off. So now if we wait for nighttime, because we've got a full charge here, we'll see what happens. This cycle will work, and it's starting to get close to night. So we'll just a moment here, and we'll see it all happen. You'll see the lights start to come on pretty soon. It should be, because it looks like it's getting dark. We don't have our panels connected, so it's not maintaining this charge. There you go. The lights are starting to come on. That number is starting to drop. And when it gets close to the 10, we'll go over and look at that other pole. All right, so now we're looking, when that signal comes on down here, we got a 1. Now that 1 closed that switch. Now our power plant comes on. Now it ran it for a little bit, brought it up above what we needed, and it's going to cycle back and forth right now because of how close we are. Now on a normal plant, you'd have a lot more load than this. The other thing we're going to look at is we're going to take that signal over to here, and we're going to look, and you'll see that negative 25, and then it'll go away when we get charged back up, and that'll cycle back and forth. Now, like I say, this is a small representation of our plant. These would stay longer than this flickering back and forth that it's doing right now, because it would take longer to build that charge back up, etc. But this is a way that I can now walk away from this, and all night long as the sun's out, if my accumulators get to a point where they won't support my grid, I can have a power plant kick in and support my grid. And if I don't need it because all of this is doing its job, then this shuts off and I don't need the pollution. So that's a way of turning these on and off. Now, you can either do it in one big bulk, or what I do is I usually do like multiple certain size plants, and I stagger these. So if, say, I want one when this goes to 50%, I can have one turn on at 50%. If it keeps falling down to, say, 40%, I'll have it turn on another set. And if that's not enough and it keeps falling, I'll have it. And so it'll progressively add and take away steam plants until you get a balance in your system. So this is a really good way of kind of controlling your power system. And it's going to kind of tie into the next thing I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is peak shaving and base load and things like that. So that's it for this one. I hope this helps you guys. There's a lot of things you can use this for. I use the heck out of it when I run multiple steam plants, and it's a really good little thing to have. All right, talk to you in a bit, guys. Okay, guys. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a couple of terms. One of them is base load, and one of them is peak shaving. You can sort of apply these to Factorio, sort of not. We talked about the SR latch, and that sort of allows us to apply our base load. And what a base load is if we have, say we have a nuke plant. A nuke plant is going to use fuel regardless of whether you've got a load on it or not. So you can have a load down here with this much energy. You can have a load up here with this much energy. The nuke plant's going to use the same amount of fuel for this or for this, right? It doesn't care how much of a load you've got on it. It's using X amount of fuel per second, all right? So what ends up happening is that as your load varies, right? If we go through, and as your load kind of goes up and down and what have you, your nuke plant's going to be able to put out that much, and that's all the more it can put out. But it won't put out. It'll obviously put out less, but fuel wise, it's just keeping there. So that's kind of a waste, right? Because you've got these points where it's not, being used, and you've got these points where it's being used to its maximum potential. So what you can do, and what they do in the real world, is nuclear power plants like the ones that are in Factorio are a little bit slow to respond to load, as far as their temperature doesn't change and it stays the same, and it takes a while for it to warm up and for the plant to get started. Anybody that's used them in Factorio knows it takes a while for them to get up. So they're a very good base load, steady load that doesn't change. It covers that load, right? So what we can do is we can set this up. Let's get rid of these. We can set up that, let's say we know that our factory has peaks and valleys that we know at different times, like when it fires the laser, it's got a lot of usage. When it's not firing a laser and it's just running certain things, it doesn't have a lot of usage. Now, in the real world, what you would do is you would set up a power plant that provides a base load, constant. It takes all of this. And then you would have another power plant that kicks on and runs and adjusts based on the whatever usage you need up here. That would be like uh, your diesel fired turbine power plants, what have you. They react very quickly to loads, whereas like your nuke plant is going to be a base load. It's very stable and it doesn't go anywhere. All right. And this is just, and there's a lot more to go into it, but just from the very basics. Okay. So what you can do in Factorio is you can size your nuke plant, right, so that it uses the maximum potential of that fuel underneath of your load. Now you could go up a little bit further and you could use steam, you could use accumulators, and you could do steam storage to take care of some of that unused for like when it was dipped below here. And you could put that in, and then that could be put back into using when here. But with that SR latch that we did, we can have another plant only kick on when it needs it, kick off, kick back on as it's needed, right? And that's what we would use our steam plants for with that SR latch. So in the real world, not so much, although it is changing with residential. The power company charges you for a certain amount of usage. And this is especially true in the industrial commercial world. So I'm going to charge, let's say, 5 cents a kilowatt hour if you're down here in usage. I'm going to charge 10 cents a kilowatt hour for anything that goes above that 5 cent mark. And then we'll do, say, 15 and 20. These are not actual numbers, they're just examples. So if most of my load is down here, right, I'm getting charged the 5 cents for this, and I'm getting charged the 10 cents for this. But occasionally I'm jumping way up here and I'm getting charged 20, 30, 40, 50 cents a kilowatt hour just for these peak periods, right? In the real world, what they do is something that's known as peak shaving. I can come in, and it may be cheaper for me to run my own power plant on site just for these times here. And by running a power plant during just these little short peaks, and with industry, they're pretty predictable. You know, at, say, lunchtime, your power is going to go down. As soon as everybody gets back from lunch, your power's jumping back up for a little bit, etc. So these peaks and valleys are extremely predictable. So you can time this and set it up so that your power plant kicks on at certain times. By doing that, a lot of times it is more expensive to pay for these peaks because we're way up here in this 20 cents a kilowatt. You know, it could even be, you know, in the dollar amounts or whatever. It's cheaper to run a power plant on site for these few times and shave off these peaks and just have to pay for everything below this, right? And then everything above this, you're running your own plant with your own fuel and this, that, and the other. And the reason power companies do this, of course, is because, you know, it's more expensive for them to bring more generators online and this and that and the other to cover like the entire city or the grid load or whatever. So you can save money by doing this. Well, we can apply kind of the same thing in Factorio. I can set up a nuke plant and know that all of my load up to this point is covered by the nuke plant. And then using the SR latches, I can come in and turn on my steam plant and start burning coal when I'm going to be up above that. Now in reality, what ends up happening is that it's going to share. The nuke plant's not going to stay at this level. It's going to come down and this is going to come down, and they're going to match, but the total is going to be this because of the way Factorio shares its electrical load between the two. In the real world, my nuke plant would stay right here, and my steam plant would just take care of anything above it, and it would fluctuate. We can't do that in the game, unfortunately. I would love to be able to do that. Maybe there's a way to do it with the logic circuits. I don't know. But there's no way to force the power plant or the nuke plant to maintain a level. It's going to go down, so it's going to use less fuel and what have you. But we can sort of do it, is the point that I'm making. So this is why that SR latch becomes important. And I know this looks like a lot of scribbly now, but these peaks and valleys are why that that SR latch becomes important, because I can kick on a bunch of steam generators to take care of this and not have to oversize my nuke plant in order to cover any eventualities. So I don't have to have a nuke plant that produces this much. I can have a nuke plant that produces this much, and then when I need it, I can have the steam plants produce the difference. All right, so there's base load and peak shaving in a nutshell. We're not going to get into things like KW, KVAR, KVA, that sort of thing. It becomes math nightmares when you start talking about that and power factor and stuff like that. We don't need it for this. We just need these two concepts. So there it is. That's the other one that I wanted to talk about. I hope it kind of clears up some stuff. I know I don't articulate the best sometimes, but hopefully it kind of clears some things up for you guys. All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye.